Welcome to Karma Chronicles. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin.
The diner always smells the same, a mix of frying bacon, fresh coffee, and the faint tang of old wood. It's the kind of place where the sound of the bell over the door rings 100 times a day, and no one really notices it anymore. I wipe down the counter with a damp rag, the motion automatic, as my family's Sunday ritual kicks off. We've been coming here for years, and I've always been the one to arrive early. Before the chaos, before the rush of families, teens, and truckers, I blend into the background like a fixture. Most don't even see me as I straighten silverware, top off sugar containers, and refill the ketchup bottles. It's a good place to hide. Just me, the cracked vinyl seats, and the clatter of dishes from the kitchen. Then there's Valerie, my sister. She's never early, not once in her life. She walks in like a storm, all loud voices and clattering heels commanding attention the moment she steps through the door. She doesn't blend in. She is the center of everything. And it's not just here. She's a high-ranking state fire marshal now, a woman who can walk into a room and make people stand straighter. Everyone knows her name. They all watch her every move, every word. She commands respect like she's been wearing it her whole life. I finish cleaning the counter and glance out at the window. It's an ordinary Sunday. At least it seems that way at first. But there's something in the air tonight. A tension, maybe, or a low buzz. I can feel it deep in my gut, like a warning bell right before a fire breaks loose. Something's about to happen, but I can't put my finger on it. Not yet. I slip behind the counter, watching the chaos unfold. Spilled sodas, the ping of a claw machine, waitresses darting around trying to stay ahead of the customers. It's always this way before dinner. People hurried, nervous, like they're all in a race. And I slip in, unnoticed but essential, like I've always done. I just wish I could shake this feeling. Something's different tonight, but what? And why? The command center was tucked deep in the national park, miles away from any sign of civilization. The air there always smelled of pine and dust, the kind of sharp, earthy scent that sticks to your skin and lungs. It was a place for people who didn't mind being on the edge of everything, where the landscape's beauty hid a constant threat. The fire could start small, unnoticed, but once it took off, it could burn everything in its path. I remember the hum of the radio, the crackle of static as we monitored the fire lines. My role was clear: keep the drones flying, track the wind, read the smoke. There was a rhythm to it all, like an invisible dance between flame and air, each breath of wind shaping the fire's next move. You learn to read the patterns quickly, to stay ahead of the flames, to be calm and precise. I was good at that. I made sure the drones never missed a beat, capturing the fire's every twist and turn, reporting back like a quiet pulse. Valerie, on the other hand, was always in the spotlight. She commanded respect the way you'd command an army, with confidence and a smile that could cut through anything. She didn't do the quiet work, I did, but she made sure everyone knew she was in charge. She was already earning her nickname, the Fire Tamer, and the media ate it up. The way she talked about fire like it was something she could reason with, control, tame, it was impressive. She'd swagger into the command center, crack jokes with the crew, tell them to keep the damn thing under control. They loved her for it. She had that kind of charisma, the kind that made everyone stop and watch. I stayed in the background. That's where I worked best. Quiet, invisible, efficient. No one ever praised me, but I was needed. Without me, those drones wouldn't fly. The reports wouldn't be as accurate, but I wasn't the one people talked about. That was Valerie. Always Valerie. I spent a lot of nights in that command center, alone with the hum of machines and the quiet crackle of the radios. Mike, the mechanic, would come by to check on the drones, his hands steady as he fixed whatever had burned out in the last fire. He was calm, always knowing exactly what to do, his voice a quiet reassurance. He wasn't like Valerie, not in the least. He didn't need the spotlight. He just worked. And I admired that about him. There were nights when I stayed late, just to watch him fix the tech. There was something about how his hands moved, how sure he was in what he was doing. It made me feel a little less alone. The other nights, I wrote letters. I never sent them, of course. But I'd sit there, in the empty break room, and write. I'd write to Mom, telling her about the work, about the fire, about how the sun never seemed to set here. I'd write to Mike too, though I never said much. Just observations, the drones, the wind, the weather. I didn't know how else to tell him that it felt like the world was passing me by, and I was just watching. I tried to explain it to myself in those letters, the way I was invisible, the way people needed me but they didn't see me. I was there, all the time, quietly making sure things went smoothly. But if I wasn't there, nothing would change. Valerie would still be the one they turned to, the one everyone remembered. And that was fine. It had to be fine. But I wasn't sure anymore. The weeks dragged on, and Valerie's fame only grew. More media interviews, more public accolades, more photos of her standing tall in front of fire lines with that confident smile of hers. She was everywhere, in the papers, on TV, on the radio. People in the base looked at her like she could do no wrong, like she was the reason the fires didn't swallow the whole state. And then there was me, still behind the monitors, still making sure the drones stayed airborne, still feeding reports back into the system, still keeping everything running. I didn't mind the work. It was what I knew. But something was shifting, something I couldn't put my finger on. I could feel the weight of it in the air, in the way people looked at me when they thought I wasn't looking. The whispers. It started with the flare-up near the civilian camp. The fire had spread faster than anyone expected, and it was bad, real bad. Someone failed to report the flare-up in time, and the media was all over it. The base commanders were all scrambling, trying to figure out what went wrong. The blame started circulating, and I was right in the middle of it. I didn't even know how it started. One moment, everything was normal. Monitoring, checking the drones, updating reports, and the next, a file went missing. A drone's footage disappeared, just wiped clean. No one knew how. No one knew why. And suddenly, the questions started coming at me. Eleanor, where's the footage from Sector 12? We need that data. I haven't seen that file in the system. Did you erase it? It was subtle at first, like I was being nudged into the spotlight of suspicion. I was careful, though, knew the job well enough to keep my head down and focus. But the feeling of being watched was always there, like a shadow over my shoulder, waiting for me to slip up. The more I tried to explain myself, the more the room grew distant. The more I realized something wasn't right. Valerie was still at the front of everything, calling the shots, giving orders, but she wasn't the one watching me. That wasn't her style. No, this was different. This was like someone had put a target on my back, and I could feel the eyes of the base commanders, the other crew members, all turning toward me. And then, Valerie stopped calling me by my name. It wasn't immediate. It was gradual, like the way the air cools before a storm. First, it was small, just little things. She didn't acknowledge me when I entered the room. She'd give orders without looking at me, like I was just another crew member. I wasn't her sister anymore. I was just someone who worked there. At first, I thought I was imagining it, that it was all in my head. But then it hit me. She wasn't just distant, she was cold, and there was a calculation behind it, something that didn't sit right with me. I kept replaying the moments in my head, the missing file, the footage wiped clean, Valerie's silence. It all felt wrong, like I was being set up to take the fall. But I had no proof, just a nagging gut feeling that grew stronger every day. I tried to confront her once, asked if she'd seen the footage from Sector 12, if she knew where the file had gone. She looked right past me, like I wasn't even there. Check with the command center, she said, her tone clipped, cold. No apology, no explanation, no sisterly reassurance. It wasn't just the file anymore, it was everything. Valerie's hands were clean, and mine were getting dirtier by the second. She had that way of making you feel like you were always in the wrong, even when you weren't. Like I was invisible, but now it was on purpose. I had to wonder if it was deliberate. Was she setting me up? Was it because I was always in the background, always in her shadow? I couldn't prove it, but I started to feel like I didn't need to. The silence spoke louder than anything else. It happened like this. I was called into the base command trailer, a small metal box tucked away on the edge of camp, the kind of place no one likes to walk into unless they have to. I already knew why I was being called, but I didn't expect the coldness that hit me when I stepped inside. Valerie was there, standing off to the side, arms crossed, watching me with that same unreadable look she'd been wearing for days, silent. Not a word, not a glance that said she was even acknowledging me. It hit harder than I thought it would. She didn't even say my name. The base commander, big guy, always barking orders, tough as nails, was the one who spoke. His voice rang through the trailer, heavy and sharp. "Eleanor Cartwright," he said, and my name sounded wrong coming from his mouth, like it was foreign. "You're being accused of major negligence, a breach of protocol that nearly endangered the lives of the team and the civilians at Sector 12. My chest tightened. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The words didn't fit, didn't make sense, but they were real. They were happening, and I was standing there exposed. What? I blurted, trying to find my voice. There's no way. Silence, the commander snapped. You're wasting time. Evidence shows you failed to report the flare-up. You erased the drone footage. You're the reason things nearly went south. His eyes didn't leave mine. He was expecting me to argue, to make a scene, but I couldn't. I felt the heat rise in my face, my palms sweating. This wasn't just an accusation, it was a sentence. And Valerie, standing there, still quiet, still watching me like I was just another mistake, like I didn't matter at all. It made my stomach twist. I opened my mouth to say something, to defend myself. I tried to speak, to tell them the truth, to explain how the file went missing, how the footage could have been corrupted, but my voice died before it left my throat. You're defensive, the commander interrupted, his tone dismissive, like he'd heard enough. It's the same thing every time. You're guilty, Eleanor. There's nothing more to discuss. My eyes flicked to Valerie. Still nothing. She didn't speak. She didn't even look at me. Take her to the brake trailer, the commander ordered. 2 of the crew members, people I'd worked with, people I'd trusted, escorted me out. They didn't speak either, like they were afraid of me, or maybe they just didn't want to be caught in whatever mess I was in. I couldn't tell. The door to the trailer closed behind me with a thud, and for a second, I couldn't move. The shame hit hard. It spread through me like heat rash, scalding, itchy, humiliating. I didn't even look up when we passed the others, didn't care to see their eyes on me, their pity, their doubt. It was like I was already gone, already the villain in this twisted play, and no one cared to find out the truth. I was led to a small staff trailer, nothing more than a metal box with a few folding chairs and a small desk. The air was thick with the smell of old coffee and stale cigarette smoke. They told me to stay in there, no official charges yet, just a temporary reassignment, they said. But I knew what it meant. I was done, banned from active duty, tucked away until they decided what to do with me. The door clicked shut behind me, and I was alone. I couldn't stop shaking. I wasn't sure what I felt more, the crushing weight of the accusation or the cold emptiness of being betrayed by my own sister. Valerie. She'd been the one to stand by me for so long, to shield me when things got tough. But now she was the one standing by, silent, letting them throw me under the bus without a word. I couldn't even make sense of it. How had we gone from that? From being sisters to this? I sank into a chair, the metal cold against my skin. The silence in the trailer pressed in on me, suffocating. I couldn't escape it. The shame, the betrayal, and worse, the feeling of being completely invisible to the one person who should have had my back. The first day in the trailer, I couldn't focus on anything. The hum of the bass was everywhere. Fans running, radios crackling, distant alarms that didn't matter, but still made the air feel tense. I could hear muffled voices outside, laughter, the sounds of people going about their day. It didn't belong here, not in the little metal box where I was stuck. The noise felt like a taunt, a reminder that the world was moving and I wasn't a part of it anymore. I was just trapped. By the second day, my body had started to wear out. I'd been in the same chair for hours, legs cramping, my stomach tight with hunger, though I wasn't hungry. My mind was 1,000 miles away, running over everything. Over her, over Valerie. I thought about when we were kids, how she used to shield me from everything. When I was too shy, she'd take the lead. When I got in trouble, she'd talk to the adults and make them listen. She was always my protector. I depended on that. But now I couldn't remember when that shield had turned into a muzzle. When did she start using silence to control me? When did I start letting her? I ran the old memories in my head, tried to figure out what went wrong. But the truth was too painful. She'd always been better at commanding the world than I was. She had the words, the fire in her belly, and I had the silence. But that silence, it wasn't weakness. I wasn't weak. I was surviving. I had survived my whole life like this, hidden in the quiet corners, making sure everything went right and never asking for recognition. And maybe that was part of the problem. Maybe I'd let myself disappear so completely that when I finally needed to be seen, no one could even look at me. The anger came next. Quiet at first, just a slow burn beneath my skin. Then, it built. If I wasn't going to get answers from Valerie, from anyone, I'd have to find them myself. I started jotting things down. every little detail that felt off, every inconsistency I could remember. Dates, times, conversations I'd overheard, names. I wrote down the flare-up report, the missing file, the wiped footage. It didn't make sense, not at first, but I couldn't forget it. There was a rhythm to how I worked. I wrote without stopping, without thinking about what it meant, just facts. I went through the motions. Day 3 was worse. The air in the trailer was too hot, the walls too close. I could feel the sweat dripping down my back as I kept writing. The exhaustion from lack of sleep had started to curl around my thoughts. But there was a clarity too, something in the silence that gave me space to see things clearly. I couldn't win playing Valerie's game. That was the epiphany that hit me, hard, like a slap in the face. She wasn't going to let me play. She had the rules, the control, and I had no power in her game. So why bother? Why try to fit into a world where I was always going to be the invisible one, always just a cog in someone else's machine? I stopped writing. My hand hovered over the next note. And I knew right then that it wasn't about winning anymore. It was about surviving and finding my own way out. The next day, the door to the trailer opened. A couple of officers stepped inside, their eyes down, like they were carrying out some routine job. One of them handed me a piece of paper, the official report. The words, "cleared of charges," were written in bold black letters. They didn't say anything else. No, "we're sorry," no, "thank you for your service." They just nodded, turned around, and walked out, leaving me alone again. There were no goodbyes, no closure. I was just dismissed. The silence in the trailer grew louder, but it wasn't the same silence anymore. It was mine. I stood up, grabbed my pack, and walked out of that place with no plans to ever look back. No one stopped me. No one tried to stop me. It was like I was already a ghost, fading into the background. But that didn't matter anymore, because something inside me had sharpened. I wasn't invisible anymore. I could feel it. Whatever came next, I wasn't going to just disappear. I was done playing their game. I didn't hear the bell above the door ring, but I felt it. The shift in the air, the way everyone's voices softened and the chatter seemed to rise and fall in waves. I knew before I even looked up that Valerie had walked in. She always did that, made an entrance. But tonight there was more. She was flanked by him, the fire chief, her fiancé now, the man who had risen through the ranks like a steel blade cutting through everything in his path. His tactical gaze swept the room, cool and calculated. He moved like he owned it all. And in some ways he did. They took their usual booth, the one in the back corner, the one everyone knows is theirs. The table was still warm from the last order, the greasy remnants of fries and ketchup a faint reminder of the chaos that had been here just minutes before. Valerie slid into the booth, her posture perfect, as always. She barely even glanced at me. Not that she ever did, but tonight it stung a little more. The regulars greeted her and him with that familiar mix of admiration and deference, the kind of praise that made you feel small in comparison. I wiped down the counter, my hands moving faster than necessary as I tried to keep my focus, tried to ignore the way my heart was beating faster, the way the old heat was rising under my skin. The fire chief's eyes moved over the room, lingering for a second longer than they should on me. It wasn't much, a brief hesitation, a flicker of recognition, but it was enough to make my chest tighten. I knew he had to remember me. We'd been on the same base years ago. He was always near Valerie, always part of the team. But he didn't place me, not yet. The quiet drone operator, the woman who didn't need attention, who blended into the background. Just another face in the crowd. I gripped the cup stack a little too tight, the edges biting into my palm. The mugs rattled lightly, a sound that shouldn't have mattered, but it did. My breath came a little quicker, my muscles tensing as I stared at the cups in front of me. I could feel it now, the shift inside me, a stirring, a snap, a pressure that built and pressed against everything I'd held in for so long. Something inside me was waking up, and it was angry. Tonight wouldn't be like the others. Tonight, I wouldn't just disappear. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I couldn't stay hidden behind the counter, the same old routine that made me a fixture in the diner, like I was just a part of the scenery. Not tonight. Not with her sitting there. With him, pretending like everything was still the same. Like they still owned the world. I didn't move right away. I let the silence stretch, let the clink of the coffee mugs fill the space between me and them. Valerie didn't look at me, and that was fine. She never did. But the fire chief. He knew something. I could feel it in the way his eyes shifted back to me again. And that little flicker. That was all I needed. I straightened up, letting the old nerves settle into something sharper, something purposeful. I wasn't going to be invisible tonight. I was still behind the counter, wiping down an already clean tray, trying to keep my breath even. But the air felt thick, like I was holding it in, waiting for something to snap. And then it happened. The fire chief stood up, all 6 feet of him, broad shoulders stiff as he made his way toward the jukebox. Everyone turned to watch, the room falling into a tense silence. He cleared his throat, and the words he spoke cut through the stillness like a knife. "We're honoring the woman who saved over 1,000 acres last season, my future wife, Fire Marshal Valerie Kane." Applause erupted. People clapped, cheered, cameras flashed, kids shouted her name. The room practically buzzed with the energy of it all. Valerie stood then, slow and graceful, her smile as wide as the horizon. She took the spotlight like it was made for her, like it was never meant for anyone else. She lifted her glass and waved to the crowd, soaking it in, her eyes glowing with smug satisfaction. But I didn't move. I didn't clap. I stayed behind the counter, the tray in my hands cold, already clean. She was the one they were celebrating, the one everyone noticed. I was just nothing. Another blur in the background. But then, his eyes. The fire chief's gaze locked on me again. This time, he didn't look away. He stared for a moment too long, like something was pulling at the edges of his memory. I froze, my heart pounding hard enough to make my ribs ache, and then it clicked. "Hey," he said, his voice loud, drawing the attention of the room. "Weren't you stationed at Sierra Command?" The room went quiet. It wasn't a soft silence, not like the ones that came before. It was a sharp, electric quiet. People turned to look at me, their eyes flicking from me to Valerie, then back to me again, like they were trying to piece it together. Valerie's smile faltered for just a second, just a quick flicker of something. I saw it, and I knew. She had to know what was coming. I could feel the shift in the air, in the way her posture stiffened, in the way she didn't say a word. She didn't look at me, not really. She just kept her gaze straight ahead, a mask of calm. But her eyes, they were the only thing that gave it away. The fire chief tilted his head, his brow furrowing like he was trying to place me. "Sierra Command, right." He repeated, a little more unsure now, the question hanging in the air like smoke. I didn't move. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The room was still waiting for me to answer, but I wasn't about to make this easy for anyone. Not anymore. Not when everything had been so damn easy for her. Valerie didn't say a word. She didn't try to stop him, didn't try to steer the conversation back to her. I watched her, watched the way her breath caught for a fraction of a second before she straightened up and plastered that perfect smile back onto her face. But it wasn't real. It was like watching a mask being carefully put back into place. I stood still, my hands tight around the tray, the cold metal biting into my fingers. The room waited. Valerie's people, the ones who had been clapping just a second ago, waited too, like they wanted to see what I would do. It wasn't about her anymore, not really. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. The weight of it felt like 1,000 eyes pressing into me. But I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the fire chief, let him look at me like he was still trying to figure it out. Then, finally, I spoke. "Yeah," I said, my voice calm, flat. I was there. The fire chief's eyes narrowed slightly. Something shifted in him, something clicking into place. But before he could say anything more, Valerie stood. She walked over to him, slipping her arm through his like she was claiming him, like she had to remind him who he belonged to. She smiled, smooth and practiced, and in a quiet voice I could barely hear, she said, "I'm sure that's enough for tonight, honey." It was a signal, a dismissal, a way of taking control. And the room seemed to breathe again, the tension breaking like a wave hitting the shore. But I didn't move. I stayed right there, standing behind the counter, watching them, watching the room. I wasn't invisible anymore. Something inside me had snapped, had finally broken free, and I wasn't about to let her or anyone else pretend like they could control me anymore. I felt the weight of the room on me, heavy and thick, like the walls were closing in. The air was stale with tension, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to hide from it. I didn't feel the urge to slip into the background, to fade into the wood of the counter like I was invisible. No, tonight I was going to stand in it. I stepped out from behind the counter, slowly, deliberately, feeling the eyes of everyone in the room on me. It wasn't the usual quiet observance. Tonight, it was different. The weight of it was too much to ignore. Valerie's gaze locked onto mine. Her smile slipped a fraction, her posture stiffening as though she could feel the shift in the air. Her eyes flicked between me and the fire chief, like she was trying to calculate what I was about to do. She wasn't the only one waiting for it either. Everyone in the diner watched me now, watching with curiosity, with judgment. I stood taller than I'd ever stood before. My chest rose, my back straight, and I felt my voice surge up from a place I hadn't known was there. Eleanor Cartwright, I said, soft at first, like I wasn't sure I even had the right to say my name aloud. But when the words left my mouth, they felt solid. They felt real. That's who I am. The fire chief's brow furrowed, his gaze sharp as he processed the name. He stared at me for a moment, confused, like he was trying to place me. And then I let it all spill out, everything I had kept inside for years. I was stationed at Sierra Command, I said, the words flat but heavy, each one sinking into the room like a stone dropped into a quiet pond. I did my job. I kept those drones in the air. I tracked the fire. I did everything I was supposed to do. But something went wrong, didn't it? Something went missing. Files, footage, all erased, and suddenly I was the one to blame. Suddenly, it was me. The fire chief's eyes widened, his gaze flickering to Valerie, then back to me, like he could hear the truth in my voice, even if he didn't want to believe it. His mouth opened like he was going to say something, but he didn't. He just stood there, stunned. I didn't give him the chance to speak. They accused me of negligence, I continued, the words now flowing without hesitation. They said I failed to report the flare-up. They said I almost got people killed, but the evidence was faked. Someone wiped the footage, someone planted the blame, and no one believed me. I glanced at Valerie then, watching her mask of calm slowly crack. She didn't move, didn't try to stop me. She just stood there, her mouth tight, her eyes cold. She knew. She knew everything I was saying was true. And the silence between us, that was the proof. She didn't deny it. She didn't speak at all. Do you know how it feels, I said, my voice gaining strength, to be thrown under the bus by your own sister, to be accused of something you didn't do, with no one even questioning it, to have the one person who should have had your back, who should have protected you, turn their back on you and let it happen. People shifted in their seats, looking between Valerie and me. Some of them started to murmur, their whispers soft but growing louder. A few glanced at Valerie, waiting for her to say something to defend herself, but she didn't. Not a word, not a single movement to acknowledge my accusations. The fire chief glanced at her, his confusion growing, but still, Valerie remained silent. And that silence, it did all the work. It told them everything they needed to know. I wasn't finished yet, not after everything she had done to me. So, no, I said, louder now, my voice steady and unwavering. I wasn't the one who almost got people killed. That wasn't me, but I'm the one who's been made to pay for it. I'm the one who's been buried in this lie, and I'm done with it. I'm done hiding behind her name. I'm done being her shadow. I looked at Valerie one last time, finally allowing myself to really see her. You're not the only one who gets to stand in the light, I said, the words bitter but freeing. I've been invisible for too long, and you can't control me anymore. For a moment, the room was completely still. The silence felt different now. It was thick with the weight of what I had just said. People were looking at Valerie, then back at me, unsure of what to think. No one clapped, no one cheered. The celebration, the one that had been so full of life just minutes before, was dead. The fire chief opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He closed it again, like the words had left him, like the authority he had relied on suddenly meant nothing. And then there was nothing left. No applause, no acknowledgement, just a cold, heavy silence. Valerie didn't speak. She didn't try to make it better. She didn't try to fix it. And that, more than anything, was the final betrayal. Because that silence, her silence, was the one that sealed everything. I stood there, no longer apologizing for existing, no longer apologizing for the truth. And when I turned and walked back toward the counter, I didn't look back. The room was still heavy with the echo of what had just happened. But slowly, like the quiet after a storm, the diner began to come back to life. Plates clattered, forks scraped against porcelain, low voices filled the air as the usual chatter resumed. But it wasn't the same. The energy had shifted, like someone had pulled a thread, and nothing quite fit the way it used to. I stood behind the counter, my hands moving almost mechanically, cutting slices of pie, refilling coffee cups. I kept my head down, but every now and then, I caught the eyes of the patrons. They weren't staring, they weren't looking for a show, but there was something in their gazes, a quiet recognition, a subtle nod of approval. Some even whispered, "Good on you," as I passed by. It wasn't loud, but it was there, and it settled somewhere deep inside me, soft and warm, like I could finally exhale after holding my breath for years. A little girl at the claw machine waved at me, her small hand fluttering in the air. I waved back, a real smile tugging at my lips. It wasn't forced, not like the polite ones I'd given for years. It was genuine, born from something that had finally clicked inside of me. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen. Across the room, Valerie hadn't moved. She was still sitting there, her fiancé beside her, both of them as still as stone. He looked confused, caught somewhere between embarrassment and frustration. Valerie's eyes were red, but she didn't wipe them. She didn't make any attempt to pull herself together. She just stared at the empty space between her and me, like she was still waiting for the world to make sense again. I moved around the counter, sliding a fresh slice of pie onto a plate. I didn't look at her, didn't give her the chance to speak before I set it down in front of her. The silence between us was thick, like we were standing on opposite sides of some invisible line that neither of us could cross anymore. When I walked away, she stood up. I could feel her presence behind me, the weight of her gaze on my back. "Ellie," she whispered, her voice fragile, the name an old thing she barely recognized. I didn't respond. I didn't turn around. There was nothing left to say, no point in pretending things could go back to how they were. I reached for the pie cutter and breathed in deep. The cool metal felt solid in my hand. As I sliced through the pie, the knife moved smoothly, effortlessly. The sound of it was clean, sharp. A small thing, but it felt like a declaration. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't anyone's shadow. I wasn't apologizing anymore. And I finally felt the quiet victory of that truth settle into my bones.